Do you think I'm insane? I mean, what a way to start a first meeting.
Right. That's Elon Musk talking to the author of some of these sources we're looking at.
Exactly. Picture this.
Mm.
Dinner's wrapping up, and then suddenly this, like, giant yellow cotton candy thing arrives.
And he just digs right in.
Yeah, it just immediately signals, okay, this is going to be different.
It really does. And that question, am I insane? It almost feels like he's acknowledging, the sheer scale of what he's thinking even back then. Maybe a little self-aware about how out there his ideas might seem.
Totally. It sets the scene perfectly for our deep dive today. We've got some great material here, really zeroing in on Musk's early life, those formative years.
Right. South Africa, the beginnings of his first companies like Zip2 and his early thoughts on financewithx.com.
Which became PayPal, yeah. And the very, very early seeds of Tesla and SpaceX. So our goal, like always, is to pull out the really fascinating bits, those key moments. For you, listening, if you want to get up to speed quickly, understand the different angles without getting totally bogged down.
We're basically tracing the roots, looking at how those early experiences and decisions built the foundation for, well, everything that came after, these incredibly ambitious projects.
Okay, let's start way back. South Africa. Childhood. The sources talk about this incredible focus he had.
Yeah, almost like a laser beam, and this idea of his brain being like a graphics chip.
Right. That visual thinking, seeing things in intense detail.
It makes sense when you hear those stories, like people doing jumping jacks right next to him, and he doesn't even notice.
Totally lost in thought. They even thought maybe he was hard of hearing at first.
Which obviously wasn't the case. It points to this deep immersion, shutting out the external world. You can see how that focus would be, well, pretty useful later on.
And his mom, May, called him nerdy and a little different. Maybe not the easiest labels as a kid.
Probably not. But interesting that May herself was apparently into math and science, considered a bit of a nerd too, so maybe some of that intellectual curiosity ran in the family.
Yeah, and the family dynamic seems, well, interesting. His dad, Errol, an engineer, they had a plane, went on adventures looking for the lost city of the Kalahari.
Right. So maybe not conventionally warm, but definitely an environment with intellectual drive and a sense of adventure. And May's modeling career, later in life too, shows some real resilience.
Then he makes the big move. Canada, age 17.
Yeah, driven by a couple of things, it seems. One, wanting to get to the U.S. eventually.
And two, wanting to avoid military service in apartheid South Africa. Kimball, his brother, apparently called it a prison for someone like Elon.
Which really highlights that proactive nature, right? He wasn't just going to sit around. He saw an obstacle, figured out a way around it. That's telling.
And he lands in Canada and just hustles. Odd jobs. Selling computer parts out of his dorm at Queen's University.
And that story about cold calling people.
Oh, yeah. Him and Kimball just calling up interesting people from the newspaper Blue Jays marketing head, a bank exec.
Just to have lunch, to pick their brains. That's pretty bold for kids that age.
Shows that hunger for knowledge, right? That proactive learning.
Absolutely. Peter Nicholson, one of the guys they call, remembered being impressed by these, ambitious young guys.
So that drive gets him to UPenn, dual degrees, economics and physics, finishes in 97, though the timeline gets a bit fuzzy sometimes.
Right. There's that mention of Stanford, like a brief stint for a physics PhD in 95.
Yeah, apparently Stanford couldn't even find a record, and a Nobel Prize winner there didn't remember him. It's strange.
Well, Peter Nicholson does remember Musk agonizing over that decision, Stanford, or his software idea.
Ah, the virtual city navigator.
Exactly. Nicholson encouraged him, called it the crazy internet thing.
And that seed becomes Zip2, which, let's be honest, the start was anything but glamorous.
Oh, totally. Living in the office, showering at the YMCA.
All running on that initial $28,000 from his dad.
Right. That was
It's
basically
their entire runway at first.
Yeah.
And that intern's car wheel falling off.
Yeah.
Classic startup chaos.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Just sheer willpower, making do with almost nothing.
And the business model for Zip2 changed too, right? They didn't stick with the original plan.
No, they pivoted. Initially, it was direct-to-consumer, but then they shifted to selling software packages to newspapers so the papers could build their own online directories.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Recognizing where the real opportunity was, maybe the easier sell at the time.
Adaptability, key for any startup. And that pivot helped them land that $3 million from more Davido ventures.
Which let them scale up, hire more people,
Yeah.
poaching engineers from Silicon Graphics, apparently.
Right, getting serious talent on board.
But that growth came with challenges around his management style.
Yeah, the sources describe him as incredibly demanding, very direct, blunt even.
And his sense of time. Like an hour to him might made a day or two in reality.
Apparently. And not afraid to just rewrite people's code himself or tell someone flat out, I don't really give a damn what you think.
Oof. Intense. How did the team handle that?
Well, it's tough. Drives progress, maybe, but definitely creates friction. Justine, his wife at the time, saw it as more strategic, intellectual, and apparently he did learn to, modify it a bit over time.
But the intensity was still there.
Oh, yeah. That seems core.
And Zip2 eventually sells to Compaq. Big number, $307 million.
Musk gets about $22 million, Kimball $15 million, a huge success financially.
But there was also this feeling reading between the lines that they felt Compaq didn't really get the vision.
Right. And Musk apparently reflected later on his Zip2 management style, realizing his assumptions weren't everyone else's. That's significant self-awareness.
Absolutely. Provided the cash for what came next, but also maybe some important lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before we jump to SpaceX and Tesla, let's touch on his early finance thinking. That Bank of Nova Scotia internship story is interesting.
Yeah, where he tried to pitch that low-risk thing with U.S. government debt.
And got shot down. His takeaway was basically that bankers just follow the herd.
Shows that contrarian streak early on, right? Questioning the status quo, seeing opportunities others miss.
And even earlier, 1995, that internship at Pinnacle Research, he was already thinking about an internet bank.
Believing online finance was inevitable, even when most people were skeptical. That quote about money just being low bandwidth, data in a database.
Pretty insightful for the mid-90s.
Definitely laid the groundwork for X.com, which, eventually merged and became PayPal, though his time there was eventful.
Yeah, getting ousted as CEO, then coming back. Another story entirely.
For sure.
So after Zip2 sells, he's got money. Buys the McLaren F1, a plane.
Living it up a bit.
But then he gets seriously ill. Malaria in Brazil, nearly died. Then viral meningitis.
Wow. Those kinds of close calls, they tend to change your perspective.
Yeah, the sources suggest it really hit him and Justine hard, maybe made him rethink things, look for something with more meaning.
A catalyst, maybe? Pushing him towards something bigger?
And that bigger thing seems to have been space. After he was pushed out of PayPal.
Right, that turbulent exit.
He started revisiting those childhood space dreams, called it a greater calling.
His first real step was connecting with the Mars Society. Sent them an unsolicited $5,000 check.
Which got their attention. But then he looks at NASA's website and is just disappointed.
Oh.
No real plan for Mars.
Yeah, that highlights his bias for action. He didn't just want talk. He wanted a concrete plan, tangible steps. NASA's perceived lack of one probably just fueled his desire to do it himself.
Which leads to the slightly crazy plan to buy a used Russian ICBM.
To send a greenhouse to Mars initially, yeah. That was ambitious.
And he brings in Jim Cantrell, who had his own colorful history in Russia.
Satellite deals, house arrest. Yeah. You can see why friends were getting worried, trying to stage interventions about his spending.
But that failed ICBM attempt was maybe crucial. It forced him to realize he couldn't rely on existing stuff.
Exactly. It pushed him towards the idea, okay, I have to build the rockets myself. And Cantrell, despite the background, was key in bridging that gap to the realities of the industry.
And boom! SpaceX is born. The early hiring sounds wild. Young grads, almost prank call style recruiting sometimes.
That also experienced engineers from Boeing, Lockheed.
Right, that mix of raw energy and veteran know-how. Must have been dynamic place.
Probably. You get the fresh ideas, challenging norms, plus the grounding from people who've actually built rockets before.
And the culture. Intense doesn't even begin to cover it. Long hours, huge pressure. Chasing that first DoD contract, TACSAT 1.
And blowing off steam with Quake 3 and Counter-Strike sessions with the boss.
Who apparently usually won, playing his random 9.
It's a weird detail, but it shows a different side, right? Still demanding, but maybe fostering some camaraderie through shared intensity, even in gaming.
And his learning curve on rocketry was steep. Just devoured textbooks, then grilled his engineers relentlessly.
Yeah, that quote from Kevin Brogan, Musk would quiz you until he learned 90% of what you know.
Wow. Just absorbing it all. And that famous acronyms seriously suck email.
Ha! Yeah, very direct. No ambiguity allowed. Focus on efficiency.
Which, in rocketry, probably pretty important.
Big think so.
Okay, while all the space stuff is ramping up, the seeds of Tesla are being sown elsewhere. J.B. Straubel.
Right, the battery guy. He was obsessed with lithium-ion early on, doing all those nerdy shit calculations, as he called them.
Seeing the potential for long-range EVs when others weren't quite there yet. What was the big deal with lithium-ion then?
Energy density, mostly. Way more energy packed into the same weight and space compared to older batteries. That was the key to getting decent driving range. Plus, better power for acceleration, lasted longer. Straubel saw that potential.
And he was persistent trying to pitch this electric car idea. Eventually gets a meeting with Musk, set up by someone else, about an electric plane, actually.
And Musk just gets it immediately, invests $10,000 right there, even though Musk himself was initially thinking more about ultracapacitors.
Shows that willingness to be swayed by the data. Right. Straubel had the numbers?
Yeah, pragmatism alongside the vision. If the engineering makes sense, he seems willing to shift.
And important to remember, Tesla wasn't Musk's initial founding. It was Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning.
Right. They had the initial focus on the luxury market, the early technical plans, looked at using tech from AC propulsion.
And their first R&D space. Super basic. Like one Craftsman toolbox.
Humble beginnings. Shows you don't need a massive facility to start something revolutionary, just determination. Musk came in later as the primary investor and chairman.
And influenced the Roadster design, wanting more practicality, carbon fiber body, making it distinct from the Lotus Elise it was based on.
Right. Pushing the design forward.
But those early Tesla days were rough too. Key people left, right, Berdichevsky, burnout, vision clashes.
Yeah, that quote about it being like being Kurt's in Apocalypse Now. Intense respect for the mission, but an overwhelming environment.
Seems like a pattern in these early ventures. High stakes, high pressure.
Very common in disruptive startups, yeah.
On a lighter note, Robert Downey Jr. visits SpaceX, gets inspired for Tony Stark.
And puts a Tesla Roadster in Iron Man's workshop.
Cool crossover moment. Shows how these ventures were already capturing the imagination.
Definitely. Though let's not forget, the Roadster itself got plenty of criticism early on, too. Labeled a fail by some.
And all this work, SpaceX and Tesla ramping up simultaneously.
Yeah.
It took a huge personal toll. His marriage to Justine was under immense strain.
Yeah, she talked about feeling like an arm ornament. And that quote from Antonio Gracias about Musk being ready to spend his last dollar on the companies.
Just total, almost obsessive commitment, risking everything.
Speaks volumes about how deeply he believed in these goals, more than just business.
And speaking of risk,
Yeah.
that fourth Falcon 1 launch attempt nearly ended in disaster before it even launched.
The rocket actually buckled during transport.
Yeah, they had to scramble, basically patch it up on the launch pad. Incredible pressure.
Wow. Those moments, those near failures and recoveries, they really forge a company's culture, don't they? Build that resilience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And knowing that failure could mean the end for both companies. Musk putting his last bit of cash into both SpaceX and Tesla then.
Facing the real possibility of losing it all. Unbelievable conviction.
So stepping back a bit, it's interesting to see these efforts against the backdrop of other ideas about innovation, like Jonathan Huebner's 2005 paper.
Yeah, the declining trend in innovation idea, the tree metaphor that we've picked the low-hanging fruit of major inventions.
How does Musk's work fit with that? Is he proving Huebner wrong, or?
Well, Musk's ventures are definitely a push against that idea, aren't they? Trying to force new big branches on that tree space energy. It's a direct challenge to the notion that the big breakthroughs are all behind us.
But not everyone sees it that way. Some critics say Solar City, Tesla, SpaceX, maybe not truly fundamental breakthroughs.
Right, and you have economists like Tyler Cowen questioning the practicality of Mars, Hyperloop, suggesting maybe it's partly attention-seeking.
And arguing EVs just shift the environmental problem.
It's important to hear those critiques, right, to get a balanced view. Are these solutions truly solving the core issues or just changing them? Valid questions.
And Vaclav Smil adds another layer, stressing manufacturing's importance for real innovation. He admires Ford's vertical integration.
But seems a bit reserved about some of Musk's stuff, surprisingly.
Why do you think that is, given Musk's focus on manufacturing with the gigafactories and all that?
Smil's perspective is often very grounded in the physics and economics of energy and materials. He might see the ambition but question the long-term scalability or efficiency, or maybe even the fundamental necessity of, say, colonizing Mars from a resource perspective. He looks hard at the nuts and bolts.
Makes sense. Despite all these different views, though, the consistent thread is Musk tackling problems he's been obsessed with for decades.
Right. EVs, space, these aren't new interests for him.
And actions like Tesla open sourcing its patents.
Yeah, suggesting the goal is bigger than just one company's success. It's about accelerating the whole transition to sustainable energy, which he sees as good for humanity.
Peter Thiel admires his ability to pull in talent, sees the Mars mission as giving people hope.
And even Hyperloop, born from frustration with California's high-speed rail, It's that drive to find radical new solutions.
It all circles back to that huge overarching goal, making humans multiplanetary, even if it sounds, silly sometimes.
And the key difference compared to someone like Bezos is Musk had to build the successful companies first to fund that space dream.
Right. Blue Origin was funded by Amazon Wealth. SpaceX had to succeed on its own to fuel the Mars ambition.
It's a crucial distinction. The success of Tesla and SpaceX wasn't just business success. It was the engine for the ultimate goal. Required incredible risk and near-term execution.
So wrapping up this deep dive on the early years, we've seen that intense focus, the drive from childhood.
The early hustle with Zip2, the foresight with online finance.
And then the shift to these massive challenges in energy and space, marked by incredible personal sacrifice and brushes with failure.
Yeah, and for everyone listening, it really underscores things like having a powerful vision, taking risks, and just being incredibly resilient when things go wrong. His early path is a pretty potent example of all that.
Definitely. So here's something to chew on. We've heard the different takes on his impact, the huge risks involved. What do you think his biggest legacy will be? Is this relentless drive going to truly reshape our future, or are there limits to the vision we haven't hit yet? We're thinking about.